Holy! I think Walter's 92, I believe.
Is he really?
I think he's 92. But was there the sense of competition? We've seen it in the movies, and we've heard about it in books and some pundits say it. Was there a sense of competition among the astronauts themselves? Let me ask you, Bill.
Well, we were all hoping to get a flight, and particularly when you're down near the bottom of the totem pole like I was, junior guy, you were careful not to put your foot in it. And so there was some quiet competition, but I think in general people were more cooperative than they were competitive. Now, I must tell you that one thing that Frank won't admit is that the question about who was the first around the moon, and I claim that I was flying the spacecraft, gave it a little left yaw, so I went around the moon first. Not that that was competitive.
That's not competitive at all, are they? No. Anybody want to dispute that, Jim?
And I took the picture.
It's a tough crowd. I don't know. Listen, I'd like to once again, and matter of fact, this is the moment. Those of you with questions, if you would begin lining up at that microphone, we'd like to get you all set. I very much want to get your questions for this distinguished group up here. And if some of you I know out there have some personal relationship with this great trio, and if you have information, would be thrilled to hear it. In the meantime,
up to a point.
while they're coming up to get ready to do that, let me ask you this question, and let me start with you, Frank, on this one. I'd like this from all three of you. What's the future of space exploration, and what should it be in your mind, Frank?
Well, it looks like the future now will be going back to the moon. And from my standpoint, that seems appropriate. The humans going to Mars, I think the difficulty there has been underestimated. So it seems to me before you can really run, which would be a trip to Mars, I'm in accord with what they're trying to do. I don't know what they're going to do with the space station, but I hope they find a use for it.
Are you on the same page there, Jim?
I kind of agree that I think that we have to have a very constructive space program, because not only it's not the ending of getting someplace, either to the moon or to Mars, it's the technology that's developed in the process of getting there, whether we're successful or not, or whether we ever get to Mars or not. The technology that we develop spills over into the private sector, as it did in the early days of the space program. And for that, I think that a government program like NASA, I think, is very important, because it touches on all of us, it touches on all parts of the country, and it's a creative program. It also generates taxes, both individual and corporate, that flow back into the government again. So we get a lot for our dollar in supporting space activities.
And you're in agreement with Frank about what the immediate future of the space exploration should be. Is that right?
Yeah, the moon.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary, because we still have to develop the newer technology that we used in the past. What we used was archaic now. What we have now in hand, we should all go back there and see how well we can function to go into that place first, because we know we've been there. So we want to continue that and then figure out whether we can go someplace else.
Bill, would you go along with this? Do you agree?
I agree with the lunar aspect. I think we should look at revisiting the moon more, less like we look at going to McMurdo Base in the Antarctic Station. I don't agree that that the program vis-a-vis the technology is a reason for doing it. It's very expensive to put man in space. And we have to, NASA and the public needs to keep in mind that we didn't go to the moon for Teflon frying pans or lunar rocks. We went to the moon to beat the dirty commies. And that's what Frank said. I mean, that's it.
You need to tell NASA that.
Well, I have, you know. But NASA sometimes is in the aerospace industry become a jobs program. There's a lot more jobs out of a big shuttle and a space station than there are in some of the unmanned vehicles.
Do you have any ideas what should happen to the space station?
Well, I don't know. Frank put it very succinctly. It would be nice if they could find a good use for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been hard to come by.
But you know, you really, we should give credit to the people that have built the shuttle and are flying the shuttle. Enormously complicated, difficult tasks with all the EVAs and everything, and really not much in the public eye. So I have a real high regard for the people that are involved in the shuttle program.
Yeah, me too. But if you're talking about getting NASA had public support because of the Cold War, and when the flag went in, the support dwindled, and so I think it's important to have the political support in order to fund these things, and there just isn't that kind of support for a lot of what is really running up the bill these days.
So when the Berlin Wall went down, the support for NASA started to dry up.
When the flag went in, well before the wall went down.
That's right. When Apollo 11 landed, the competition, the challenge, disappeared.
Right.
And so
I see what you mean.
What you're talking about now is, do we go on to develop technology or develop, and Bill says, well, sometimes we ought to look at it. And he has some factors because the unmanned program, the Hubble telescope, fantastic success. Mm-hmm. Perhaps we learned more about the universe in the last 30 years than we have in the last 300.
Well, the Hubble telescope is really a manned program. It can't operate without shuttle support, and the space station requires shuttle support. And so there's a lot of real unmanned programs that have been shoved over the side because they haven't got the funding for them. I think that's too bad. I think we ought to have a manned program. I think it ought to go back to the moon. But to expect it to have the support that Apollo had for the same reason, I think, just doesn't work. And I think it's almost ludicrous to be talking about going to Mars as Americans racing the Chinese. We ought to go back to Mars or those places as human beings from a planet that can somehow work out its problems.
Working it together.
Yeah.
I see.
I think have to probably. Don't you really agree? It'd be so expensive. That's probably the only way it'll ever happen.
Yeah, and in the radiation environment, I think, has been massively
I meant a
understated.
cooperative program.
Yeah.
Okay, let's check these questions. Who's this?
Hi, I'm Ellen Ingalls. I'm from Connecticut, and it's really an honor to be here as somebody who is really in awe of the astronauts and wanted to be one in the 60s, and I was inspired to a 34-year career as an engineer by the science involved in the astronauts. My question is, did you have any downtime as you were waiting to orbit the Earth during the flight? Enough time to play cards, have camaraderie? What kind of behind-the-scenes fun time did you have together?
If you'd worked for Frank Borman, you'd know there was the answer to that.
Boy, you're getting a lot of heat today, you know.
But because he snapped the whip, he made it successful.
I got sick and threw up all over the
We weren't going to bring that up.
Bring it up. That was one more thing than we needed to know. Did any was there any card playing? Anybody who brought the dice? You know, whatever.
No, actually, I think we were pretty busy most of the time, either navigating or experiments. If you ask that about Frank and I on Gemini 7, we each bought a book along, reading a book and writing logs, but that was a 2-week affair.
Each read it twice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Who's next?
Hello. I'm Frank Cerisi, and I'm from Arlington, Virginia. And my question is really prompted by what I think two of the three of you said earlier, which was relating your mission to the Cold War. And I started thinking about that. And my question is this. Did you three at the time ever meet any of the cosmonauts and develop any kind of a relationship with them? And was there any sense of competition in a personal matter, not a Cold War matter, between the astronauts and the cosmonauts during the 60s and early 70s?
Frank, why don't you start that one off?
I had not met any of them before Apollo 8.
No, at that time, they were still very secretive, and we didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know the names of anybody except Yuri Gagarin and a few of the early people that came out in publicity, but we knew very little of what they're doing.
I might have met them when I was chasing Russian bombers over Iceland in my fighter. But they made the Tom Cruise gesture.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
But I met